Hello everyone, in today's video I will be narrating stories that I found off of Reddit. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to my channel, like this video, and comment something down below. But without further ado,
let's get straight into these stories.
I used to participate in a group that did activities intended towards children. We usually went to neighborhoods to make games for the kids and so on. On Halloween, we usually went to give candy to children while on costumes. That night I was dressed up as the Joker, so I went to the rally point and met the other guys and girls with whom we were going to give candies. We were about 30 or 40. The night went as planned. We did some games, then we handed out some candies, and then we said goodbye. 3 of my best friends were there, and after the activities were over we sat on a bench and talked about random stuff. Eventually, we got to the topic of Halloween parties and how we never went to one. We really wanted to go to a Halloween party, dance, drink, do teenager stuff. I'm kind of an introvert, but I've always tried to live my life so when I'm old I don't have to regret not doing stuff. And party was one of them, so I, too, wanted to go to a Halloween party. They called our friends, but no one knew of any party. Eventually, we got in touch with our friend Lewis, who was 18 at the time, asking him if he wanted to do something. He told us he was going to round up a few people and then we could go out in 20 minutes. In those 20 minutes, we went to a friend's house, we cleaned up, changed clothes, and then Lewis called us back. He told us to go to a park nearby to get together. We went, and we reunited with 6 of his friends. 4 we knew, the other 2 we didn't, but they were nice. Thinking on what to do next because his house was now unavailable, we decided to go to a skateboard park nearby to see one of them do some sick tricks with his kind of eccentric skateboard. We were all in awe, but after a few minutes we got tired down. After that we went to the cemetery to tell horror stories. Disrespectful, I know, but we were teenagers doing stupid teenager stuff. After that, Lewis said, "Dude, wanna go to drink?" We all said let's drink, and we went to a convenience store to buy some alcohol. I think I have to say that in Chile people from that are 16 are expected, yet not legally allowed to drink unless they are with an adult, and we were with people from 18 to 21 years old. Legally adult age is 18, which is also the drinking age. So we had the alcohol, but we didn't have a place to go to drink, so we went to a forest that was about 15 minutes outside of town. We couldn't see nothing, so we were with our phones' flashlights on. When we got to a nice quiet spot, we lit up a fire. We made sure that there was no flammable material nearby. In front of us was an open field, and behind us was a wall of bushes. So as the night went on, we spent hours listening to music and drinking, telling funny stories, laughing, playing tag. It was a really good while until it wasn't. Anyways, it got to be about 3 in the morning after a while of dancing and drinking. We were kind of wasted, except for Lewis, his girlfriend, and her sister, all which decided to remain sober in case something came up. We played hide and seek and tag. It was really funny and a very good time. Then, while we were dancing, we heard something in the bushes. We thought it was an animal, like a rat or a bird, so we didn't think none of it. Then, we continued dancing around. I remember seeing clear as day a stone going a few centimeters away from my leg. I thought Lewis kicked it, and I told him, "Dude, stop kicking rocks this way." He laughed at it off and thought I was drunk and joking. While I was kind of wasted, I was still in my senses. Then I saw another rock going in front of my eyes. It was like in slow motion. I looked up, and I saw on Lewis' face a sheer expression of horror. I got scared as well. The only thing he said to me was run. I was like, what? And he screamed at me, "Run, dude. Someone is throwing rocks." I ran back to the town, to the houses and the lights. Behind me people were screaming, "Run," and "Hurry." I ran as fast as I could. I was kind of drunk and the terrain was really muddy. It was really dark and I couldn't see where I was going. All I knew was that I was running towards the lights. I ran until I reached the same spot where we came from, already in town, then waited. I was alone, and no one came. I didn't know where my friends were. After a while, a friend of mine showed up. He screamed at me, "Dude, give me your jacket or something." They hit Fred on the head. When they came closer to the light, I saw him helping the others to walk. Upon seeing his face, blood was running down and dripping. I immediately gave him my jacket and called an ambulance. Then some of my other friends came, one by one. They all went to Lewis' place because it was nearby. Then Lewis came. "Where is my girlfriend and my sister-in-law?" He said. I told him she didn't come through. We sent everyone to his house and waited for the 2 missing people. We were ready to go and face the people throwing rocks in case they were doing something to them. But then they appeared. His girlfriend was hysterically screaming, "They hit my sister, they hit her, she is bleeding." We went to her and the whole side of her face was covered in blood. We rushed her to Lewis' house and made sure we were all there. So we calmed down, and when the ambulance came, the 2 who got hit went there. We then called the cops. I remember some of us being in shock, others were angry, and others were kind of in the middle ground. Lewis was raging. "These kids," he kept saying. We didn't know who threw the rocks. I thought we got in the terrains of someone without knowing, and the owner tried to scare us away. but my friends told me they saw a group of people hiding in the bushes. We left everything at the bonfire, the skateboard, the speaker, some wallets. For me, I had everything safe. Lewis then told me and my friends, dude, let's find these guys, let me call some guys and let's go after them. I was mad, but wanted to retrieve some of the stuff, so I told him that we would go, but if there were too many of them, then we would turn back. He called 2 of his friends and in 5 minutes they were with us. I knew them because of some school stuff, but they were very loyal and they both went to the gym. They were some big guys, so I felt safe when they came. Eventually, we went out to look for the people who threw rocks. When we were about a block away from the forest, we saw them walking with our speaker, the skateboard, and other stuff we left there. We were a block away from them and we just stared at each other. There was like 15 of them and only 6 of us, so we didn't do anything and just turned back. As we got a good look at them, they were clearly gang members, so they probably had guns and knives. When we came back home, we ran into the police car. There were 2 of them. One got out of the car. We told them we called and explained the situation very fast because we didn't want the guys to run away. However, the officer told us, you were telling me you were drinking, being minors, and then got attacked. We told him yes, and then he responded with the most upsetting stuff ever. So you minors were drinking, doing a bonfire at the forest in the middle of the night, and are now asking me to give you justice. Don't you kids realize how hypocritical you are? I responded with, we were in supervision of 3 adults, and not because we were drinking we deserve rocks being thrown at our heads, dude. He looked at me with an expression of pure hatred. I was really scared but angry as well. He then repeated himself. We told him the guys were running away as we spoke, but he kept saying it was our fault we were in that situation. After a few minutes, the one inside the car told the other, hey, let's find the other people and then we could question these kids, and the other got inside. We waited at the house, but they never came back. Eventually, we all went to our respective homes. Lewis told us the next day that the policemen never returned. Before I had even graduated from high school, I knew I wanted to live in apartments. I was a bit naive at the time, drawn in by the many amenities I would never use, but I primarily wanted to live there because the complex was pet friendly and within my small budget. When the time eventually came for me to get my own place, I sublet the only apartment that was available and moved in. Unfortunately, I came to realize the apartment wasn't as nice as I'd originally thought. The building was old but remodeled, so it had all the typical plumbing issues and thin walls. I also learned it was not the safest part of town. I was primarily an online student, but I had one class that met in person twice a week around 8 in the morning. I'm a bit of a homebody, so I rarely left during the day except for that class, the occasional shopping excursion, or to spend time with my boyfriend in the evening after he got off work. My apartment was a bit of a Bermuda Triangle, even though it was only 600 square feet, and I lived alone. Things had a way of growing legs and walking away. I had 2 kittens at the time and blamed them regularly for things disappearing. Something odd that kept reoccurring, however, was that I'd find my underwear box out and sitting in the center of my bedroom floor on days when I had class. I didn't have a proper dresser, instead using a shelf with some boxes for designated clothes, socks, underwear, pants, pajamas. I always could have sworn I put the underwear box away after getting ready for class, but I chalked it up to me forgetting as a result of having to get up early and being focused on getting to class on time. Arguably paranoid, I started to think that some of my laundry was disappearing as well, as favorite articles of clothing would go into the laundry hamper and seemingly never come back with the clean clothes. Towards the end of that semester, I was working one evening on a homework assignment when my boyfriend called to let me know his roommate had accidentally locked him out of their apartment. I had a key to their place, so he asked if I could run over real quick to let him in. Before I left, I made a mental note that I had left literally every light in my apartment on. Because I was living on a pretty tight budget, I normally made a point of turning off all the lights when I left, but my boyfriend only lived about 5 minutes away, so I knew I'd be there and back very quickly. Sure enough, I got back less than 15 minutes later. I immediately sensed something was off, as I could see the lights were off through the blinds. I called my boyfriend and he drove over to meet me. We unlocked the door and went in. All the lights were off in my apartment. Thinking maybe I'd had a power outage, I flipped on the main light and it came on. My boyfriend checked the entire apartment. No one was inside, but someone had gone through and systematically turned off every light at their switch, including my lizard's basking light, the only light I always left on because it was on a timer, and my laptop, which I left open on my assignment, but now the computer had been powered down and closed. We called the emergency maintenance number and I explained that someone had been inside my apartment and that they had to have used a key because there was no sign of forced entry. The manager called me back and told me I had to be imagining things. Maybe I had forgotten that I had turned off the lights before I left. I assured him that I wouldn't have turned off the computer or the lizard light. Someone had been in my apartment. I told him I was extremely worried because obviously this person had a key to get in. Either they worked for the complex or maybe it was a previous tenant/guest. I asked if they had changed the locks after the previous tenant moved out, and they assured me they changed the locks after every move out. The manager suggested maybe it was a friend pranking me, someone else I had given a key. The only other people I had given keys were my boyfriend. His key to my apartment had been locked inside his apartment on the same keyring as his own apartment key. And my mom, she lived 3 hours away. In any case, neither of them would have pranked me in this way. The manager finally agreed to send someone out immediately to change the lock for my peace of mind. I brought up my concern that it was someone on the staff since they would be the only other people with keys. The manager claimed the keys were locked in a special safe that required a personalized code to track who took what keys and when in an office with a security camera. They changed my locks, but I had my doubts that it would do much good. As far as I was aware, there were only 2 maintenance men that worked at the complex, one nice, older man that didn't seem all that skilled, and a younger guy with a scruffy beard that gave me a bad feeling. I suspected he had to be the one that had come in. When I had first moved in, the manager had told me I would be getting a new kitchen counter within the first 3 days. I waited to move in my kitchen stuff, but after a week they had it come, and then after a few months I had completely forgotten about it. One day I was sitting in my living room and this scruffy maintenance guy walked in without knocking or announcing himself, and I hadn't received a notice to expect him. He said he was there to replace my countertop. It took him 2 days to install one small piece of counter. A few weeks later, I was getting out of the shower and heard a single knock at the door. I called out, "Just 1 minute," and hurried to get some clothes. Not 2 seconds later, the door started to open and I had to slam it shut, still wrapped in a towel, to stop him from coming in. He claimed he hadn't heard me call out, but I had my doubts. I don't remember what made up excuse he had for coming in. Another time I found a note from him that he had come in. Again, he didn't give it a reason as to why, but that he'd made sure not to let my cats out. He also made a note about my third cat being cute, except I didn't have a third cat. I did however have a picture of my childhood cat in my bedroom on the shelf where I kept my clothes. At that point I went to the office to ask them to make a note in my file that I wanted at least 24 hours notice before entry going forward, and I wanted to always be present for future entry. Now that I knew without a shadow of a doubt that someone was coming in secretly, it all made sense. It hadn't been long after the surprise maintenance visit stopped that things had started moving around in my apartment. He was also on site all the time. Everyone on staff also lived at the apartment complex, so he would know when I came and went. After the night with the lights, I put my own lock on the door, but still didn't totally trust the apartment. I ended up buying a condo shortly after with help from my parents, subleased the apartment, and moved. Right around that time, I also got my first job working in a different apartment complex. In the final days before I left, my mom came into town to help me move my stuff. While she was home alone, I was at a class. She caught the scruffy maintenance man trying to get his key to work in my lock. She demanded to know what he was doing, and he said he was there to paint the front door. I hadn't received a notice, and he didn't have any paint or supplies. She told him he could wait until after I had moved out. A few years later, I was stopped by the owner of the apartment complex while working at another complex in town. Shopping is when an employee from one apartment complex takes a tour at another apartment complex under the guise of wanting an apartment for the purpose of gaining information they might not otherwise easily give up. It can also be performed by your own management company to make sure you're doing a good job. There were certain tells a shopper always gave, like asking specifically worded questions. Is this safe here? I'm a felon, can I live here? That required specifically worded answers and were easy to trip up on. Being too wealthy for the complex, Rolex watch, sports car, nice suit, and being too flexible on what they were interested in. They were interested in all the layouts and were open to move in whenever. This guy seemed too old and too well off to be randomly considering an apartment here. We were geared towards lower income people. While I was giving the tour, he asked if I had any opinions on other apartment complexes in town and mentioned the old one I worked at specifically. Normally I wouldn't badmouth any other complexes. I prefer to win them over by showing them the positives of our community, but I told him that I probably wasn't the best person to answer that question because I was probably the only person to give the old apartment complex I worked at a bad review in the last 5 years. He asked me to elaborate, and I told him my apartment had been broken into and I suspected it was someone on their maintenance staff. At that point, he revealed that he was the owner of the old complex and that he was very disturbed to hear I had this experience. He asked me to describe the maintenance man in detail. I assured him it was in the past and I was over it, but he insisted on calling the manager over at the complex, still the same guy, to ask him over speakerphone if they had had any issues with the maintenance staff back in the year I had lived there. He answered yes, Yes, there had been a scruffy young maintenance man he'd had to fire because he'd been caught multiple times breaking into the apartments of single women. Satisfied, the owner proudly told me the issue had been resolved and asked if I would be willing to change my review. I told him no, none of this had changed the fact I'd experienced this and actually validated what I had suspected. In the years I worked as a leasing agent, I learned a lot about where complexes will cut corners to save time and money. From my experience, a lot of complexes did not switch out the locks if the tenant was good, and a lot did not require background checks for employees even though they did require them for tenants. Keys also got passed out willy-nilly to vendors and maintenance during turns, and employees frequently got master keys that would open all doors. I won't go so far as to say every complex operates this way, but every complex I worked at was doing this when I started there. Because of my own experiences, once I began managing a complex, I enforced strict rules about changing locks, tracking keys, posting proper notices, and requiring background checks for all employees and tenants. If you're renting an apartment, stay diligent. If you have reason to believe someone is coming into your home, document it and let the staff/police/family/friends know. You never know who might have a key to your apartment. Several years ago, I was in the midst of an acrimonious divorce from my then husband, full of crazy allegations and typical angry filings centered around custody of our child. As with many divorces, friends and professional colleagues seemed to pick one side or the other. In my case, there was one sort of professional contact who reached out to me after hearing about the divorce, who offered to be a witness for my case because of some experiences he related that I had been previously unaware of regarding my ex's behavior out at networking events. After this initial call, he started calling on a semi-regular basis to make sure I was okay. This wasn't someone I knew well prior to the separation, and he was much older than I was, but claimed to have experience with divorce and custody, and I figured it was a good idea to be polite and not alienate him, since his testimony was important. Per my lawyer, I kept things friendly, but I always had a weird feeling about him. After a few months, he called one day that my son was very sick, and when I told him I couldn't talk and explained why, he offered to run to the store for me, which I honestly appreciated. But after that, he was dropping by the house uninvited, or he would stop by with cookies for my son. Again, I kept telling myself to keep things polite. The divorce is coming soon. Don't make this guy mad. He had called me out of the blue, and I was worried at this point that I was walking a very fine line being polite but clearly not interested, and that if he got mad, he might decide to go testify for my ex and say who knows what. During this time, he had also helped me set up a security cam system my dad had mailed me, and at one point, I needed someone to walk my dog, and he had offered to do it. He used and returned a spare key the same day. One evening he showed up while I was painting and insisted on sticking around to help, even though I was having my starting over catharsis and wanted to do it alone. Just after the painting day, he came around, uninvited and unannounced, with magazine photos of decor, and started carrying on in this manic way about how we could finish decorating the house. I was so weirded out that I made an excuse to leave, started ignoring his calls, and took my son and dog to stay with my parents for several weeks to avoid a drop-in. I came home just for custody exchanges. I came home a few weeks later, thinking he would have gotten the hint, and it was a quiet day. The following morning, I took my son on an outing, something like the zoo, and we both came back hot and tired. I put my kid down for a nap in my bed, and decided to close my eyes with him. I woke up maybe an hour or so later, and it took me a moment to realize something was way off. As I'm blinking off the sleep, I realized there was a rose bush sitting on my bedside table that I most definitely had not put there. There was a post-it note on it, something about planting it in the yard. I started shaking immediately because I recognized the handwriting, and stood up to go splash some water in my face and decide whether to call my parents or the police. I didn't want any trouble because of the divorce. As I stepped into my bathroom, I realized that the mirror was covered in post-it notes, all with super creepy messages that were intended as like love notes or with affection, but which all scared me. I was still waking up and trying to figure out how these notes could possibly have gotten into my house. My front door was definitely locked, but as I went from room to room, there were notes everywhere. I mean hundreds of post-it notes covering the walls and my cabinets. There was even one inside my coffee maker. I started grabbing all of them and putting them into a pile when I got to one in the kitchen that made my blood run cold. It said, "You're cute when you think no one is watching you." And I realized that there was a security camera pointed right where that note was left, the one he had helped me set up months earlier when I didn't think he was a psychopath. I called my parents in hysterics, sent them a bunch of photos, and my dad insisted I should not call police, remember custody battle, but that he would drive over and change the locks and put a chain on the door. We also immediately changed the passwords on the security cameras, which had been installed to document if my ex tried to break into the house, So there was one on the front porch, but 3 inside the house, including one in my bedroom. This man could apparently see and hear everything going on inside my house for months. The security cameras, I realized he had just paid attention to my passwords when I was setting up the system. But the only way I could figure out that he got into my house is that he must have made a copy of my house key the day he had it. And because my dog had gotten to know him, he wouldn't have barked to warn me, which also scared me. I was absolutely horrified. This man had been in my house for a long time. There's no way he could have put that many notes up quickly, and he was right next to my face at feet from my son while we were sleeping, and somehow thought that was okay. I left and stayed with my parents again for a few days, afraid of what he was going to do when he realized that he was now both physically and digitally locked out of my house. When I came home, my son had gone to his dad's for the night, and I was home alone on the phone with another friend from out of town. At about 10 at night, this man showed up at the door, pounding on it, trying the locks, screaming obscenities, and demanding to be let into his house. Gone were all the niceties. This was someone completely furious and derailed. All I could do was hide in my bedroom until he left. What felt like an hour later. This was St. Patrick's Day, so I am sure he had been drinking. After that, there were several other times someone would start knocking on the door in the middle of the night, always when my son wasn't home. I think he was crazy, but not that crazy, and figured if I called police he would get in more trouble if my son was there, but he knew the schedule, so I know it was him. He tried reaching out using fake social media accounts several times, always getting blocked. Years later, I discovered that he had friended my mom on Facebook and was therefore still able to see all the photos of us that she posted or shared, and there was a huge argument when I saw she had left her computer logged in, a conversation they were having about me and how he could get back into my life. I sold that house 2 years later, still finding new notes even as I was packing, and I am more than relieved that he no longer knows where I live. I don't post photos of my new house online, not the front anyway, and I have changed the privacy settings on my social media accounts. I avoid all the places he used to go, the networking events he attends, and I stay as under the radar as possible. I could never bring myself to play back the security camera videos because I was traumatized enough and didn't want to see just how much danger we could have been in. This roller coaster of a story is still ongoing 2 years later with no end in sight. It all started when I wanted to further my education and get a bachelor's in information systems. To give a little about myself to help paint the picture, I'm a 26, 4'8" woman. I get called jailbait often because I look way younger. During the beginning of my studies, my current boyfriend and I had broken up, so I told myself it would be best to stay single until I finished school. I took to the internet after my breakup, as most do, just looking for company. I had found this one group on Facebook where I felt like I belonged. I got along well with everyone, and I loved to flirt in this group. That's where I met him. Let's call him Kemper. Like many others before him, I had latched my claws into him and began flirting. I even had a little crush on him. Things began innocently. I flirted, and he flirted back in the group. He seemed very mysterious though. I guess that's what drew me to him. He didn't have a profile picture, not of him at least. He never told me his age or what he looked like. After a few weeks of flirting, a woman in the group we were both in had mentioned that it was his birthday. I knew I wanted to do something for him, but I was pretty limited on what I could do. Now, before I get flagged for this, just know I have never sent an unsolicited topless picture to another man, not until that day at least. On the picture, I wrote happy birthday, insert his name here, and press the send button on Messenger. Just that split-second decision had changed my life the past 2 years. It's so easy looking back and thinking what you could have done differently, but there is no going back now. Within a week of talking non-stop to Kemper, he was already telling me he loved me. He was working as a truck driver, but at the time he had broken his knee at work, so he was out of commission for a few months, which allowed him to talk to me as much as possible. During this time, I was working as a delivery driver with DoorDash. It was easier for me to make my own schedule since I wasn't done with school just yet. The first few months were great. We would talk constantly over the phone and through Messenger. Also, let me point out quickly that this was a long-distance relationship between Kemper and myself. So, I remember the first fight we ever had. Heck, even before then I could see the red flags slapping me in the face at every turn. However, our first fight was because I was texting him while driving. He flipped his lid and totally went crazy on me. It was very unexpected, and it made me cry. I can't tell you how many times I tried to apologize and tell him it wouldn't happen again. After the incident, I was blown away how easily something so little, or at least I thought it was little, would make him do a complete 180. Months go by and the fights continue more frequently. One point, he had mentioned how cool it would be to have an app where we could see each other's location. In my naive and in love state, I did some quick search and found an app called Life 360. me. We both downloaded the app and now he could see everywhere I go. At first, it was a neat idea to say the least, to follow him around everywhere he went to feel closer and more connected to him. That's what I used it for. He, however, wanted to use it for different reasons. I learned over time how controlling, manipulative, and how psychotic he was. We would argue about things, and even when I get mad, he would somehow turn things around on me and make me feel like I'm the bad guy. The first time we broke up, it was a bad show. He had broken up with me on the group we were both in just because I had flirted with another guy and he didn't like it. He was telling the other guys in the group how much of a bad person I was and how they could have me. He even threatened to give out my address to the guys in the group so they can come to my house and, well, I'm sure you get the idea. My friend, let's call him Adam for the sake of the story, he was a member of the group and he could tell how upset I was in the group comments, and he messaged me personally for the first time. Kemper and Adam are both well-off men with the world at their fingertips. I guess that's part of the controlling bits or showing aggression when they don't get their way about things. Before I go into more detail about Adam, I just want to recount a few incidents with Kemper to give the readers a better understanding of what kind of man he is, and how dumb I am letting things to continue the way they have. One incident happened months ago. He and I were fighting seemingly over nothing, and I was driving home from a long day of work and school and Kemper just blurts out I wish she would just run off the road and into a ditch and died. I was speechless, the tears welled up in my eyes and the driving became harder because I couldn't see, so he almost got his wish. I had to stop at the Dollar General in my town to compose myself. I couldn't breathe, I was wheezing. The man I had thought I loved was wishing I would die. If he hated me that much, why is keeping me around? I just wanted to curl into a ball at that moment and just disappear for a while. I didn't want to go home, but I couldn't just stay parked at Dollar General. I was really at a loss for what to do. It wasn't until a while later where I told my mom and dad what he said. They were already getting their pitchforks ready, and ever since then, they haven't liked him. Kemper has anger issues along with so many other issues as well. I know I'm not perfect, but at least I don't act like he does. I'm very friendly and I get along with almost everyone. I guess that's part of his problem with me. We are complete opposites when it comes to that. During our time together, I had gotten 2 other jobs at different times besides the DoorDash gig. Just part-time though. Notice I said I'd gotten 2 jobs. Well, the first one was at Walgreens. The very first day on the job, I was doing certifications for the job, and during the whole time, he was blowing up my phone, telling me I don't need another job, or telling me that I won't have time for him, or that he would need to find someone else to replace the time I had spent with him while also keeping me around. I just couldn't take it, so I quit. Fast forward a few months later, I get another job. This one was at Dollar General just at the town over. I did work there more than a day, but his nagging ultimately made me quit that job as well. I just recently had a talk with him about graduating soon and how I will find a job at a hospital working normal hours with better pay. Well, he didn't like that too much. He found some reason to be mad at me and start a fight, and he has gotten in the habit of ignoring me for a day or 2. He's even ignored me for a whole week, and honestly, that was the most peace I had gotten in a long time. As of right now, Kemper and I will have the chance to meet this coming January 2023, although I'm really not sure about it. 2 years of ups and downs, and him having my heart and ripping out when it's convenient for him has me thinking it may not be the best idea. Also, it may be the fact that he has told me of his violent past with an ex-girlfriend of his. This happened many years ago, but it scares me knowing he could be this violent. What had happened was, his girlfriend at the time was putting on makeup. He hates makeup, and they got into an altercation with him blacking out, and him pinning her down to the bed and choking her. He didn't even realize what he was doing until he came to his senses. He's told me lately that if he ever caught me in his bed with another man, he would punch me in the face, not the guy simply because the man didn't know better, and I did. I've spent a lot of time and effort into this relationship and wanting it to work out in the end, but honestly, not sure if meeting would be the best thing to do, now or ever. So let's talk about Adam. He's a tad bit older than me. He's 49 years old while Kemper is 48 years old. You would think they would be mature for their age. Well, Adam is very mature, Kemper not so much. Adam and I began talking the first time Kemper and I had broken up. He was being a concerned friend and messaged me asking me what was going on. I spilled everything to him. He was like a best friend I didn't know I had. He was so easy to talk to, and he even began opening up to me about his troubled upbringing. We would talk about everything and the topics would become more intimate. After a month or so of talking, he too would begin to tell me he loved me, but only as a friend. I knew better than that, and it made me uncomfortable knowing that someone I've only had a handful of conversations with would tell me he loved me. Over time, I felt bad for talking to this man, but he was a comfort when Kemper and I had broken up. bet our conversations went from semi-normal just to weird. Let me mention real quick, just like Kemper, he too didn't have a profile picture, but he would post pictures of himself on the group, so I knew what he looked like, and he was a very handsome man. After a while of talking to him, he would send me some other pictures which seemed to be newer pictures which looked nothing like the pictures he had posted in the group. I didn't make a fuss out of it, just assumed the pictures in the group were older pictures. One day he had told me he was getting a haircut. I was trying to be polite and asked for a picture to see the new haircut. Days later he finally sent me that picture. I wasn't sure who this person in the picture was. It looked absolutely nothing like the previous pictures he had sent. At the moment, I assumed I was being catfished, but it didn't matter to me because looks really don't matter. So this is my story so far. Not sure how things will turn out, but as of right now, let's not meet. Alright, but that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to subscribe to my channel, like this video, and comment something down below. But as always,
Have a nice day.